So, hello guys, welcome back to Rocket Lab Weekly Christmas edition. We have three amazing guests here on the show. We have Nico Birkholz, who has been on a mystery interview with Peter Beck that is hopefully coming out soon. We have Dave G, and we have Matt Money here on the channel. Everyone's Twitter and YouTube is in the description box below. And yeah, Merry Christmas, guys. How has your week been?
Merry Christmas.
Dave, you can go ahead.
It's been pretty good. Just kind of winding down a few things with work. And then obviously I had a great time on that live stream the other day, and Matt showed up for a little bit and had some pretty good engagement. So yeah, that was fun. And obviously, the news was great too. So it's been a pretty good week overall.
Yeah. Awesome. You Matt?
I was just going to say, Dave, yeah, you did a phenomenal job on the live stream the other day. And I think the thing that's most beautiful about all that is like the community, I feel like, is starting to truly find itself, and we're continuing to grow. And I think that's probably the most important piece. But, it's been nice. I've been hanging out for the past week, not having to do much work other than just checking some stuff on Palantir to make sure all the wells and stuff are happy because I work in oil and gas. But yeah, I got the prime rib, hanging out, cooking out on the smoker downstairs. So, it can't get much better than that. Just hanging out, doing nothing, and talking about stocks and smoking meat. So it's a great day to be here with y'all, and happy holidays.
Awesome, man. Living the dream. And Nico, how has your week been?
Yeah, perfect. I had to work until yesterday. So yeah, I'm now free to be here. And first of all, I have to thank you to be here, because I looked into my X tweets and I saw on the 19th of October, I put out my first tweet about Rocket Lab, and I think that was my first financial tweet ever. And now I'm sitting here with you three, and I'm following you three for a long, long time. So thank you very much for having me here.
It's a joy. So I have to tell you guys a story. Again, it's about the community. So this news came out about Rocket Lab's $500 million contract. And Dave, you did a live stream. And on the live stream, you said Vince must be sleeping, so he doesn't know about this yet. and then a bunch of people started writing to me on Twitter. So I woke up very early, 4 a.m. to be on Palantir Weekly, and I opened my Twitter and it's like, wake up, we got the biggest contract ever from Francisco Ramirez. And I'm like, what the heck is he talking about? And then I go on YouTube, I see that Dave is on a live stream. I started to listen to the replay a little bit. I started reading on Twitter what's happening, and then I'm like, okay, I go over to Yahoo Finance, and the news was not even up yet. And I really think that you guys are doing such amazing thing, and this finance YouTube and this FinX is definitely the future, because I was already watching, Dave's live coverage. I was reading, tweets detailing, the contract, and finance media, like the dinosaur media, was still sleeping. So it's really amazing.
I want to echo that. I mean, I didn't, even before I saw the articles, I had people tweeting at me, like Chris and also Scott Killian and a few others, being like, what's going on with Rocket Lab? And I checked after hours, and because I checked my stocks during the day, I was like, it's a rather flat day for Rocket Lab, plus or minus a couple %. And then I see this big spike up, and I'm like, what the hell? And then I get on Twitter, get on YouTube, and already see Dave, live streaming. I'm like, we're quick. Like, I like this. This is awesome. And so I just did my quick little 5-minute guy and hopped over to Dave's after I posted that and hung out with him for a little bit. And, I love to see the community rally behind something that it's been a long journey for me, 2.5 years at this point, going on 3 years. Invested in the stock, and I'm sure for Peter and many others, it's many, many more moons than that, and launches as well. So it's just cool to see that everyone's continuing to rally behind the stock, and it's great to see the community grow.
Yeah, for sure. I just wanted to say, even now, I haven't really seen very much coverage of this contract. So kind of surprised that it's not like a bigger deal on, mainstream sites.
Yeah, and I think, okay, I want to take your opinions on this, but I was surprised that the stock only moved 20% on this news, because I threw around some numbers. And what's really weird with Rocket Lab is the stock was going up, then we had this successful launch, then we crashed, and now we're back to the same point when we went back to launching, but we are so much better with this contract. So yeah, it doesn't really make sense, but we can go around. Maybe we start with you, Dave. What are your thoughts around this contract?
I mean, just great news. And yeah, like I've kind of talked to you previously a few times how and I think we all have struggled more on the space system side, predicting future revenue growth and like how fast they're going to grow. And then you get kind of the insight of this contract and how many years it's going to be. And you could say, if you could try to like project how much revenue that means per year, you're like, whoa, I think I was way too conservative on the space systems growth. So that helps for sure. And obviously it's like a big deal, and the customer is nice to see because they're very legitimate and for real. Yeah, it was just super exciting. The stock movement that day. Yeah, I never try. I don't know. I can never predict like these short-term moves. Like you see it with the launches. It's just all over the place sometimes.
Cool. Matt, what do you think about this contract and the significance of this contract?
Well, at first I saw 500 some million, and I was like, really cool. I was like, okay, is this going to be for, next year, 2025? And although it would be nice to see it kind of closer, I mean, you have to think it's going to take moons and months and quarters to be able to put all these 18 spacecraft together. So it is cool to see that, there's something with respect to the pipeline being active until 2027 to 2029, 2030 timeframe. It just means that the trust is there in the organization that they're going to be around, right? And that's, I think, what's most important to me, is that this is becoming a staple where people are planning in the second half of this decade for opportunities and a backlog, knowing that the company is going to be around. And that just shows the true dominance and the true impact that the company's had and the trust in the organization. And I think it's a huge testament in the foundation of what Peter's built, almost over the past 15 years, almost 20 years, actually. So it's cool to see. And I'm really anticipating that this is the first of potentially many that will come through for these guys. And continued collaboration between NASA, SpaceX, and all the other players in the space, as we've continued to see, right? They're collaborating with Firefly. They're collaborating with everybody. And so I think it's just going to be not only the U.S. government with respect to these sorts of contracts and defense contracts, but also New Zealand, Australia, Japan, South Korea, and I'm sure many, many other countries as well, as Cadence begins to grow, that we'll see continue to trust in Rocket Lab for the future.
Awesome. Nico, what were your thoughts when you saw this contract?
Awesome. I think this was a door opener for other contracts coming in. And I think this contract shows everyone who is not too deep into Rocket Lab that this is not just a launch company, but also a space system company, and what big possibilities are lying in this business. I think no one has really looked at it before. And here we see one contract, 18 satellites, maybe with some launch opportunities. We don't know what's written down in the details. And yeah, and then it's just one contract. And I think the government needs to get into space. And if this contract goes well and they get more confidence from the government, yeah, the future is looking better than 1 week before.
Awesome. I want to get your guys' thought on something, because it says in this 8K that they will basically start on the production of these satellites immediately. So I was throwing numbers around, and they don't specify when in 2027. So it could be like, the way I translate that they say the production will start immediately, I think that's Q1 2024, because it's Christmas now, and I don't know what they can possibly start on it now. And if it's early 2027, then the contract is 3 years. If it's late 2027, it's 4 years for them to deliver the satellites. And if you look at the pessimistic number, because they have incentives and options, I guess if they move very fast and reach milestones very fast, and you divide it back, I have some numbers here. Let me see. Did I share my screen? Yeah. So if you divide it on 4 years, it's 30 million per quarter that it adds to the space services. And it's, if you think with a 35% gross margin, then it's a 10.69 million gross margin per or gross profit per quarter. And if you divide it on 3 years, it's basically 14 million gross profit per quarter. And it's so funny. I just saw I made a major mistake here, but the point is, because this is per quarter, right? So over 3 quarters, that is a 45 million addition to basically that they're burning that much less cash. And that almost brings them to almost break even, because we know that, you know, they're going to launch more rockets. There's going to be other contracts. And I think that this is why this contract was even more significant than what they make it out to be. Like, did you guys also see that? Or am I wrong on how I'm calculating? Or, yeah.
No, I would say, like, I didn't really think about it that way, and like you're right. It's extremely important, I think, like when in 2027 they get delivered and all that kind of stuff, because that's when the revenue gets recognized. I'd be curious to see, like, is there any other Capex involved in like delivering these? Do they already have all the, you know, facilities and equipment they need, or not? But yeah, if those numbers are what hits the bottom line, then that's like a great acceleration for profitability.
Yeah, you see, what's very tricky is I was reading this book, Common Stocks and Uncommon Profits. And there he talks about that in the bookkeeping, it's very different what companies report as gross profit and what they report as R&D. Because, you know, you can basically, as you said, like spend on these and you can book it as R&D, or you can just spend on these and you're like, yeah, it was part of making the satellite, so it's just part of the cost of making the satellite, right?
Yeah.
And this was also my question. Like, I don't know how, I don't see that deep into their bookkeeping and how they report it. And they have just bought or you know, they took over the Virgin facilities. They have this new facility in yeah, you guys have to help me out where
Maryland.
that they
Maryland,
yeah. And I'm like, yeah, logically, like they should be pretty ready to deliver on this contract.
Yep. I was looking into it, and I think at the moment they have a big issue because they did so many acquisitions. They got so much more factories, possibilities, new workforce, and I think this will take some time until everything works correctly. And so they have to organize every different part, and I think this will take months, maybe 1 year, maybe 1.5 to bring everything together. But I think they are aware of it, and they start rising the capabilities. And so I really believe that, especially this new contract regarding the actual possibilities, will grow into this business. So over time, they will be capable to produce more and be more efficient. But I think at the moment, yeah, they should not run, they should walk like they did before.
Yeah.
Sorry, just one thing I wanted to add is, like, I remember hearing from someone online, and, you know, one of the forums we all participate in, saying that they work at Rocket Lab and like they're crazy busy already. And then I saw this deal and I was like, oh my gosh, if they're already so busy. But yeah, hopefully all the expansions can help them deliver it.
Cool. And then the next Rocket Lab news of the week, which was kind of sad, is that it looks like, let me share the the tab that they moved this. Can you guys see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet.
No.
Not yet. Okay, let me.
There we go.
Looks like it's coming up.
Yeah. So they moved this first Archimedes engine hot fire test. It used to be here before 2024, and it got moved to 2024. And this is basically a clear sign. I believe also on the earnings call, Peter Beck said that, yeah, like you have to see certain things happening. And if you don't see them happening, then you know that we're delayed. So I guess we're at this point now that we see that they're delayed. How much do you guys think this affects the Neutron timeline? How bad is this, or is it no issues at all? I think we can go around and again start with Dave, and then we go to everyone.
Sure. Yeah. So I actually have a video about Archimedes coming out probably like a few hours after this, but basically we don't have a ton of details. Like 2024 is so close. If they drop a static fire early January, then like, I don't think I'm too worried, but what a lot of people are, I think, more disappointed about is kind of a lack of communication around it, like why it's slowing down. And even this was just kind of, casually put on a timeline. So I guess we'll get more information at the next earnings call, but I don't think we'll be launching in 2024. And I do think Archimedes is like the item to watch when it comes to Neutron timelines.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Matt.
Yeah, I'd say the same. I mean, I don't necessarily want to immediately anticipate that, everything's going to get pushed out of 2024 until I kind of hear it from the company's mouth. I know a lot of times companies will put fluff into a lot of these timings. So maybe, and I know, how do I say this? I know that Peter Beck acts on Peter Beck, and he doesn't act like Astra, we'll say. And he actually is most of the time able to deliver. And so what I don't know is, going back to what Dave said with the communication piece, I don't know how much fluff and wiggle room they put into these timelines, right? Where they could slip a quarter or 2 quarters and they still will be able to meet. But agreed. I mean, if things continue to push to the right, I don't know if, I don't know how long it'll take between, let's just say, the testing of the hot fire of the Archimedes engine and eventually getting things on the pad, right? I don't know in terms of completion where we are. Are we 90% complete? Are we 75% complete? Like, I don't know that. And will all these things kind of happen in quick succession? Generally, from what I've seen, one of these things happens once per month. And so if you start to add these things on top of each other, would they still, if they start the hot fire test in, say, January, will they still be able to kind of get things done and have, say, the final integration piece in, say, August, September, because I don't know what's holding back from a regulatory standpoint after you do all these static fire tests, putting it on the pad and putting it into space, right? Do you have to do a wet tree rehearsal and put it up on the pad? I don't know. So that's, I guess, some of my ignorance about these things. And maybe it's some work that I can go back and due diligence. I could go back to see from how long it took, let's just say, the Falcon 9 heavy firing and initial firings to when they were actually able to launch, and understand generally how quick of a turnaround that can be. But at the moment, I don't know. So I'm looking forward to February and hearing more from those guys when they February. I think it's going to be a lot of fun because it's going to be the fiscal year 2024. They're going to lay out all the revenue. They're going to lay out what the potential growth is. They're going to lay out what the new margins are for 2024. I'm sure there's going to be a big update. We'll either know whether or not some of these things have been fired, not fired. So it'll be a fun next 2 months, I think, until that earnings report.
Definitely. Nico, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think this is a nice service of Rocket Lab, providing us this timeline to show what they are planning to achieve during a certain time. And I think for Rocket Lab, there is no need to comment on these achievements every time. I think it would get too complicated that they had to argue every time on that they could remove it. And I think for us, it's good to see how they are progressing And I think if there's really a need, they will communicate it. And I think Peter Beck seems to be a very honest guy. And if there would be really a heavy delay of Neutron, yeah, at some point he will let us know. I don't expect like he would behave like other companies, say it's working, and one day before he would surprise us all. So yeah, and even if Neutron gets delayed to 2025, or maybe there's also a fault in the first launch and also the second launch, yeah, we will see what happens. We are not investing into a normal company, but it's a space company, and we could expect everything, the positive things and also the negative things.
Yeah,
Cool.
I think everything kind of relies on the Archimedes, right? Because once that's kind of completed, to me, you can do the stage 1 test before you do the stage 2 test. Like, I feel like some of these things don't necessarily have to be done in series. Some of them can be worked in parallel, but everything is relying upon Archimedes, right? So it's kind of like once that happens, that's really the driver. So if this starts getting pushed into 2Q and 3Q, then that's maybe some worry. But I think if it's done in 1Q, you can do a lot of these things in parallel, I feel like, and not necessarily have to rely on, like, I feel like you don't have to do a stage 2 static fire before you do the stage 1, right? You could, depending on how quickly things are being worked on, do one before the other. But obviously you need to have the Archimedes in order to do those things.
Yeah. One other thing I did mean to add is like one frustration for Rocket Lab, I think, is this ITAR security regulations where they can't have people from New Zealand who worked on the Rutherford engine go and work on Archimedes, because the US doesn't want like what they consider sensitive info like leaving the country. So even though it's all one company, they're kind of segregated based on country, which is probably a little annoying, I would think.
Yeah, I agree. That's very annoying and very unfair. And I wish that they could do some deal, because, like the New Zealand port is under the FAA authority. And then I wish that they could somehow do a deal that the employees there are like US security cleared and yeah, but that's not up to us. Cool. I think that was all the Rocket Lab space news this week. Do you guys? The only other news that I know happened this week is Firefly launched a rocket, and they had a picture-perfect launch. I saw their replay of the live play, and then the very last step, a rocket launch can go wrong at any part, and they went to the very last step, and it looks like the second restart of their second stage failed, and then they didn't make it into the intended orbit. And so was there any other news besides this that you guys know of?
I don't think that they communicated more than this, just that the second stage ended in too low orbit. The satellite is functional, is working, and they're expecting it to come back to Earth and to be destroyed in some weeks, but it's operational. And yeah, I think that's all. They are maybe trying to hold back some more information, but I think we already know everything.
Yeah, these second stages are tough, man. Like, I was just thinking about it when we heard about this, and I was like, well, Rocket Lab's last failure was around the second stage. We had several Astra failures around the second stage. I think the Firefly, their other failure, was second stage related. And for whatever reason, that just seems like that's the tough point. Maybe it's hard to test for like vacuum or anyway. Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, or it's just probabilities, like if something has to go wrong, and then, like the first stage has, like everything has a 25% probability of going wrong. And then because they are like the last in the queue, like if something has to go wrong, they have like the biggest chance. If everything before was perfect, I don't know. It's a curse. But yeah, I mean, that's a setback for Firefly. They're a company that I have a very hard time to research because they're not public, and I'm trying to understand where they are with their development backlog, how much of a competitor they are to Rocket Lab. And obviously, we want to see a thriving space industry, but I think
It's tough, right? Because like for Firefly, they're the ones that are helped designing the lunar lander that Rocket Lab is helping to kind of create space systems for. So it's like they also need to be successful in order to realize some of the future revenue for Rocket Lab. And so it kind of goes back to you need, and Peter talks about this, and I think it's just a known fact, you need 4 or 5 good companies to be able to excel and learn from each other, right? We're all still in this experimental phase and trying to understand how SpaceX did what they did, how Blue Origin did what they did, and it's all driving towards a common goal, which is, space exploration, or in this case, delivering things to space and becoming, not just a launch company, but just an overall good space overall sort of company for the betterment of humankind. And so until you kind of get down this path, it's like you can't get to 1 or 2 companies too early, because then the innovation might not necessarily have been as broad or as expanding as we necessarily need. So we need people like Firefly to continue to succeed, because 1, it's going to continue to drive that innovation. It's going to continue to drive competitive advantage. It's going to continue to drive margins to be better and better and better. And people probably wouldn't be trying to land rockets. We wouldn't even be talking about the Neutron launching and landing if it wasn't for SpaceX and what they did with the Falcon 9, right? So they just launched landed their 19th in a row booster, and not land. I didn't word that appropriately. They've launched and landed the same booster 19 times in a row. And I really hope that we're able to do the same thing with Neutron, but had SpaceX not done it, we probably wouldn't even be talking about it, right? Or maybe Rocket Lab wouldn't even be in the conversation if that wasn't something that we were kind of considering reusability and making sure that things are more and more affordable.
Based on this book, Ashley Vance, that I reference all the time, the only reason Rocket Lab was able to get funding was because SpaceX succeeded and opened up the VC space into, so opened up the space industry for VC financing. So otherwise, Peter Beck just would have died hungry in New Zealand with his huge ambitions and his rocket bike. And yeah. Cool. So I want to bring up one very interesting subject. Nico, you got to speak to Peter Beck on an interview, and we really want to hear, because you promised us that this interview would be out last week, and I was like checking my YouTube every hour and it wasn't out. So tell us how it happened. How did you get onto an interview with Peter Beck? Anything you can share on this interview? And yeah, go ahead.
Crazy story. As I mentioned, I just started to tweet a little bit on X, and at some point, I think 1 month before, Pounding the Table, asked me if I have some questions for a maybe upcoming Peter Beck interview, and asked the ones who are following me if they have some goods, and I submitted them. And 1 or 2 days later, I got the information, hey, Nico, maybe there's a chance that you can join this interview. And then they had to delay the interview and delay. And I don't know when it was. I think 1.5 weeks before, I got the information that the interview will start this evening. So I had nothing really prepared. That was really funny. I had a really hard and long working day, 13 hours. And when I came home, a little bit of preparation. They also were happy to have this interview, but it was really on short notice. I think it was the day before the lunch was planned, the first try. And yeah, and when I joined this interview, to be clear, it's the interview of Pounding the Table, not me. They invited me. I was happy to be there. I got the chance to ask some questions. It was awesome for me, because I think it's not too easy to get this chance, and yeah, it was good. I don't know why Rocket Lab is reviewing this video so long. I don't know if he told something what is wrong. Maybe it's not too important for them, or they have a big backlog.
Maybe you gave him some tough questions, Nico.
I was just going to say that, Nico,
I really tried it, but he's really hard to crack because he knows what he is allowed to say and what he's not allowed to say. He is not making any promises, but maybe at the end I got a good one. We will see. It was a good chance to get into it, but as we are always talking about it, you are not really getting any really new special information out of him. It's always going in the same direction, things you already know, sometimes with some small hints where you can imagine what he is talking about, but it was awesome.
And if you get new hints out of him that he normally doesn't say, then Rocket Lab doesn't release the video. So
I didn't realize they review it like that.
Yeah, I was also not aware of it. I was thinking pounding the table is just looking at editing it and then publishing it. And when I asked them, because everyone is asking me where's the interview, and so they told me, yeah, maybe it will take some more time. But yeah.
Awesome.
It's
so Johnny Mac is... Say that again.
Don't expect too much.
Okay, you're de-hyping us from the... We are still going to watch it, Nico.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. It's my third time here on YouTube, so yeah, I'm still not feeling too comfortable, but yeah.
Well, if they don't publish it, we can always go back to Nico and be like, hey, so what did he say?
Exactly.
You can meet for a beer. Yeah.
Cool. So since this is the Christmas edition of Rocket Lab Weekly, I was thinking we can do Christmassy stuff, but I don't really know what that looks like here on the World Wide Web and YouTube Live. So I was thinking maybe we could go into your Rocket Lab predictions for next year, like what can happen. I think it was Matt that we were speaking on X, how Palantir had a really blowout year. And I said that, yeah, like Palantir did have a blowout year. And I don't think that is going to continue. So I think that the stock price should normalize to a 20-30% per year. And Rocket Lab hasn't had this. So maybe last year it was Palantir. Maybe this year it will be Rocket Lab that has a blowout year. But with this stock, we don't know. Maybe we succeed with so many things and then the stock just falls on the news. So Dave,
yeah, sorry, go ahead. If you
you go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say, to preface it, I think people are going to have the same problem that they had with Palantir, right? You're going to enter a place in the next, say, 18 months to 24 months where you get to a place of net profitability on a GAAP basis, and people are going to start to throw price to earnings ratios around and all these things that, as a young company that's still trying to grow into and have a huge capital spend budget like Rocket Lab to put into Neutron, I think it's going to be very difficult to evaluate on normal metrics, right? Where you're trying to grow into these things. So people might say price to EBITDA is the thing to do, price to, normal GAAP price to earnings ratios. And I think it's just to be said that we're going to be in no man's land, I think, for a little bit. And there's probably likely to be volatility associated with the stock price due to that. And so to me, I'm more so looking at where they can be in the longer term and trying to say, well, I think it's going to be X, Y, and Z, and then kind of take a step back from there and see, per annum, where do we think we should be from a market cap perspective to get to where I think we'll end up. But that's just more so where I take things, as opposed to being like, well, the price to earnings is this, or price to sales, because all that stuff is changing on an annual basis.
And I think there's also the issue at the moment that there are not too many space companies out there to really compare it to. The same like Palantir. No one was really knowing or understanding. I think they are still not knowing and understanding what they are doing. And so I think there's the same issue with Rocket Lab. And I think the only thing people really can look into are numbers. Always numbers. They understand numbers, and if it's not fitting, into their thinking, I think they will overlook this company. And yeah, you have to dig deep into a company to see it in the early days. And coming back to your question, I think everything is possible next year. I think we can get some bad news and the stock price goes down. I think we can get another contract, not too different from the last one. Everything is possible, and the stock price, it will be a big ride. And yeah, you have to choose for yourself if you stay in this company or if you want to leave it if the price goes too high. But I think it will get a wide ride.
Yeah, so just going back to your question, Vince. First of all, on the Christmassy front, I don't have an ugly Christmas sweater. So I wore my Team Canada jersey here. I see you're rocking one. Christmas always reminds me that the World Juniors are coming for hockey. So I always get excited for that. I don't know if you ever follow them. I think hockey is pretty big in Sweden. So yeah, that's kind of why I popped this one on, because I didn't really have an ugly Christmas one to go for. And then in terms of Rocket Lab for 2022, I'm going to go ahead and make a prediction that there are no Electron failures next year at all. I think I'm very confident in the reliability of the vehicle. You know, we had this one wild
freak
anomaly, and I think we'll be fine in 2022 personally, or sorry, 2024.
You're saying 22 launches in 2024.
Yeah,
Exactly.
well, hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll see.
By the way, maybe
yeah.
23, because we're not getting, it doesn't seem like we're getting this last launch.
Yeah, they've been very tight-lipped about it. It doesn't seem like it. So 23 sounds possible for next year, which would be 10 to 23. That's quite some growth.
That is, yeah.
But yeah, I think next year is going to be so interesting for Rocket Lab and the whole space industry. Like, we have the whole ULA storyline of, will they get sold? Who's going to buy them? Blue Origin is supposed to launch New Glenn. Neutron is supposed to be getting close to launch, so we should be seeing so many more tests. So it's going to be a really fun time next year. I'm definitely looking forward to it.
Cool. Matt?
So I can go. I think the first half of the year is going to be pretty quiet. I mean, I think you'll have the Archimedes thing go off, and there might be a little chatter with that. Some pluses or minuses in the stock prices. Archimedes is hopefully a successful test. And with that, I think you might start to see more and more, I guess, excitement, especially in the retail base, but I think in terms of an institutional investor base coming through when you start to see stage 1 testing and stage 2 testing. And then eventually when you have the whole integrated piece and up on the pad, I think that's when people are going to get more and more excited. But I mean, this is all anticipating that things continue to go well. I don't know if we'll get to the whole 22 launches next year. Maybe I'm being pessimistic here, but I just know how much weather impacts these things. And so I'm hoping that there is 22 launches, maybe 23, as you said, Vince. But I just feel like weather is such a big impact, and as well as just the partner piece, right? Do they have a sufficient backlog of, if, say, somebody has to push out for 6 months because their satellite's not ready, do they have somebody else to have that slot filled, right? And I know that that's kind of what they're trying to do a little bit more of. So I'm hopefully getting to that point. And then also the last piece, sorry, my headset died for a quick second. The last piece, I think, is towards the second half of the year, I think we'll really start to understand how much of a EBITDA kind of story there is, because we have been burning $20 to $30 million in cash pretty regularly, and some quarters it goes up, some quarters it goes down, just based off of, I think, research and development spending associated with Neutron. And this last quarter was rather extensive, so we ended up with over $50 million in spend, but we still have $385 million in cash. I think we'll be okay from a cash perspective. No harm, no foul there. But the thing I'm kind of curious about is will we get to EBITDA break even, or sorry, cash flow break even? Of course, we'll have EBITDA, but will we get to cash flow break even and actually be able to to start generating some cash flow even before Neutron gets, I guess, onto the pad. And that'll be positive because obviously once we get Neutron up and running, things will be much more positive from a cash flow perspective. So I'm just confident that we'll hopefully get within spitting distance of $400 million in revenue. And I think with that, I mean, on a gross profit basis, you should be able to walk away with 120 million or so in gross profit. Now, of course, that's going to be eaten up a lot by, normal general administrative costs and things of the like. But it's another step in the right direction to hopefully getting closer and closer to cash flow break even. So, I think if you think about it in that perspective, we go and we're able to execute $400 million of revenue next year. I think you'll see the price go up by about 15, 20, 30% from where it is today, hopefully closer to the $3 to $3.5 billion mark. And then once we get the pad, everything on the pad and maybe a successful Neutron launch, that's when I think we're kind of off to the races. I don't think if you have a successful Neutron, you can have the stock be worth less than $5 billion. I just don't understand how the market cap can be below 5 billion if you and maybe one or two other companies are the ones that are able to successfully launch a medium-sized rocket and land it. The landing piece, I think, will be something that might take one or two tries before we're actually able to successfully do. But I'm fairly confident that Neutron, just based off the track record that Electron has had, they know how to build rockets, and I'm sure Neutron will go off without a hitch at the end of 24, early 25, no problem. And I think with that, the stock should easily get closer to $10. I don't know if it'll spike past 10, but it should get closer to the $10 range at some point next year. Will it stay above that? I think that's just part of the volatility, but hopefully we get closer and closer to that $5 billion market cap.
Amen to that. I hope that happens. It's actually funny because I had the idea that, or my price prediction for Rocket Lab was that we will just steadily, as we move closer and closer to Neutron, like it would just steadily go higher and higher and higher. But I think that the stock behaves very irrationally to news. I don't know what it is. Like I think we fell more on the successful rocket launch than on the rocket failure itself. And you guys opened this possibility to me that maybe we will have like a flat until it's like undeniable that this company is profitable and Neutron is flying, and then we will have like a Tesla year of the stock will 7x in 1 year. So I think that this is obviously not financial advice, but I guess if you like the price of Rocket Lab and it's within your range, you just kind of have to pull the trigger because it's very unpredictable. We don't know where the stock is going to go in the future, basically.
Sorry to jump in on that, but yeah, just what you were saying reminded me of a Reddit post I saw the other day. Forget the guy's name, but if you're watching, I'm sorry, because he was saying how he bought and held it for 3 months. And then he sold out literally the day before that contract dropped and it went up 20%. And he was like so upset. So yeah, the short-term volatility is real.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
But I think if we not just look at the upward possibilities, and we should also look at how deep can the stock price fall. And I think we have Electron, we have a good space business. I think we need not too many more years to get profitable, even with these two components, and they are working reliable. And so I think it cannot get too cheap, because at one point, under 2 billion, I think they could be too cheap to get bought by someone else. So yeah, I'm not expecting it to get too deep. So you have a certain amount of security looking downward. So yeah, if you feel good with the company, invest. No advice, but I do it like that.
Nico, you brought up a really good point. Actually, does Rocket Lab have founder shares like Palantir? Do you guys know if they?
I don't know.
Because it's Nico, you really brought up an interesting point. Because if ULA is being sold for around 5 billion, or that's the price that I heard, like, wouldn't it make just more sense than to try to buy up Rocket Lab if the price is crazy low and they have developed Neutron or they're very close to Neutron?
And you could say Rocket Lab would be potentially more valuable because considering ULA does not have a reusable rocket as of yet.
Yeah, there's an argument to be made. The one thing with ULA is they do have that big backlog for Vulcan and the NSSL program that's worth a lot of money. But I do think Neutron should have more longevity as a reusable rocket in terms of like providing value in the distant future versus Vulcan. Like I feel like that should fall off. And then, of course, yeah, ULA doesn't have the whole space systems side. So I think there's an argument to be made for that.
Do you think the Electron will eventually go the way of the Falcon 1 rocket, where it just eventually just ceases to?
Peter's kind of said that he thinks it'll always be there'll always be a small launch market. I wonder if at some point, I hope they don't anytime soon, but I guess just, if the revenue it brings in is so small compared to a Neutron launch, I guess I can see why companies often go to focus on larger rockets over time. So,
and I guess the one thing that I'm thinking about now in retrospect, after just making that statement, and I kind of I don't want to say backtrack from it, but I don't think you have to have a third launch pad specific for Neutron. And so it's not like you could just be like, okay, instead of all these Electron rocket launch pads, we're just going to make them Neutron. It's just like, you can't just switch them out that easily. So maybe with some retrofitting you could, but it's not like you could just immediately put a Neutron rocket on an Electron pad and just shoot to space. So I think it would take some retrofitting and at least some time before the phasing out would occur. But it might be something where it's easier to only have one kind of rocket to focus on and stack pay, and have more ride sharing pieces. But I don't know. I'm not the one creating all the logistics. So
that is a path like a lot of companies have seemed to follow. Just, I don't know why. Like it's pretty interesting. You have SpaceX with the Falcon 1, and then we also have Relativity just canceled their smaller rocket. It seems like a lot of companies start with a small one and then cancel it. And Rocket Lab's kind of the one that's gone against that trend and just continued to operate it.
But on Relativity, do you think that maybe the cancellation has to do with that Electron is working so good and is basically dominating that part of the market, and then they just gave up competing with them totally?
I don't think so. I mean, it's more of like a 1-ton vehicle, and Electron's like 320. So they're kind of different markets. He did say in an interview it was more just like they just wanted to put all their resources behind their larger rocket because obviously, the revenue one launch of that can bring in is so much more, and then these things can scale better. But yeah, I'm not sure.
All right. I want to ask you guys about one other thing, is that on my Twitter, I saw some people commenting that there is also another contract maybe coming in January for Rocket Lab that is similar size as this one. Do you guys know which one that is? And yeah, how real is this thing?
I know Chris has been chattering about it, but I personally don't know.
I also don't know. Not seen anything.
No, I haven't heard about a contract coming for Rocket Lab. I've heard rumors that these 18 satellites are SDA satellites, and that is apparently being broken up into a few 18 chunks. So maybe that's where, I don't know if that has something to do with where it's coming from, but I don't think that's been confirmed.
If I might ask?
I believe it's going to be launched as part of the NSSL program, and they're kind of like missile tracking and stuff like that. Space Development Agency, I believe. It's an SDA constellation.
Okay, cool. I was getting very excited when I saw the news, and I'm like, I don't know about this, but okay, then I'm not the only one who didn't hear about this.
No. Here's a question for you guys, if you don't mind me jumping in.
Yeah, go ahead.
When do you think we'll get a first customer for Neutron announced? That should happen next year as well, right?
Yeah, I was actually just posting. Somebody said, like, with getting contracts and stuff, it's like, it's hard for me to say. Like, I know they said specifically, I'm just going to ramble. I don't really have an answer, right? Or a very hardcore answer, but just based off of listening to the Q&A and the last earnings call, they were kind of getting pushed by the analysts to say, when are you guys going to start taking? When are you guys going to start taking? When are you going to start taking orders? And they were kind of just like, we'll get there when we demonstrate, functionality and actually feel like we have a usable rocket. And to me, it's like, when is that, right? Is it after Archimedes gets tested? Is it after the stage 2 testing? Is it after stage 1? Is it when you have the whole integrated rocket on the pad? Like, when is that milestone where you could be like, okay, this is a reality? And I don't know. To me, I feel like it's after you kind of have stage 1 or stage 2 testing. So I would say the middle of 2024 or whenever they actually have that. But also, I don't. It's another piece, and I'll take your question a step further. It's like, when would they take that customer? Would they want to fully fund the Neutron rocket first launch by themselves, or would they want to try to launch something into space? I personally am in the belief that Peter would probably fund it himself, and once they demonstrate capability, then take on customers. But yeah, and then also, how many launches is it going to take to land the rocket? Is it going to be one? Are they going to do it on the first try? Are they going to do it on the second? But anyway, bunch of different questions associated with Neutron. I just figured I would take it a little step further.
Yeah, I think we don't know when they will really sign contracts, but I believe that they are in talks with possible customers, so they will be prepared once Neutron is ready. And I think at the end of the day, paper will get them written down and signed. And so, yeah, I'm personally not really thinking too heavy about it, because it's so up to Rocket Lab how they decide to make things like that public. Too hard for me to understand or to imagine.
Hopefully they didn't do. They are not going to do like an 8K like here. That, guys, we have successfully launched a Neutron rocket and we're ready to.
That live stream of the first Neutron launch will be fun. We can't miss that.
Yeah, that will be excitement guaranteed.
And stress.
Didn't Peter say that they will try to land it on the first try?
He did, yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean they'll succeed, but
yeah.
Yeah, I remember asking this and somebody educated me on it or corrected me, because I don't know the answer. How many tries did it take the Falcon 9 to land? Wasn't it 3 or 4?
No.
It was like
a bunch. 10 or 12. Yeah.
Yeah, there's actually a pretty cool video you can watch. Is just like a montage of all the different attempts exploding and crashing into barges and stuff. It's pretty fun, but it had never been done before at that point either. So,
because wasn't it like they landed it successfully on land, and then they said, well, now we're going to do it on the barges, right?
They kind of had some attempts at the barges as well, I think, before this first successful land return to the launch pad. But yeah,
I'll have to look at it.
Cool, guys. So is there anything else regarding Rocket Lab and Christmas and that you guys have on your mind?
No, just other than thank you guys for collaborating and creating this great community where I think we're really going to be able to rally behind Peter and the friends. And I think, try to remove yourself specifically from the stock price. I would say for most of us, I think supporting the company and supporting those guys is probably the most important thing, and the stock price will follow. And I think that's probably the most important thing to recognize is, if you truly fundamentally believe in the company and you're here as an investor, not only in the company, but in its success, to eventually get to where it needs to be, which is a fully self-sustaining end-to-end rocket company and space launch company, and just space systems company rather, not space launch, then you will be rewarded handsomely for that support. And I think that this is a unique opportunity in the market, and I think we all have started to recognize that. But sometimes it's not necessarily about the stock price. Sometimes it's literally about just the company doing the right things. And I believe in this company. I believe in Peter. I believe in Spice. I believe in all those guys that are truly doing a phenomenal job. And being a shareholder over the past 2.5 years, then I know they've had a long history before then, but seeing them integrate the space system company and really change it from a small launch company to an entire end-to-end space company and taking me along in that journey has been a huge maturity for myself. And seeing them do that, to be like, really like scratch my head to be like, why are we spending so much money on this? Like, it doesn't make sense to really bring me along to understand how this company is truly trying to be different than many of the other companies that are out there on the market, specifically like Astra and many others. And I think that this one is going to be one to hold for the long term. And that support that you guys can give them is going to be what really makes the stock price phenomenal in the long term. They're a company first, the stock price will follow.
Yeah, I mean, just to add a little bit to what you were saying, that many investors who are long-term investors can get upset on companies because they miss quarterly numbers. And I just also want to remind that the space industry is even more extreme, and you have to be more focused on the long-term picture, because the delays on normal rocket companies is in years and not in months and not in quarters. And if they miss a quarter or two with the Neutron, it's not like you have to, start hating the company and sell all your shares. That's completely normal. And also on the other side, like this contract that we got, that's also completely normal, that any moment they can announce that they got a mega constellation or they got a new contract, and the stock can soar to the sky in a way that you cannot catch it. So my advice is that you do your due diligence, you come up with what is a fair price for you, and if the stock is below that price, you buy it, and then come what may, you hold it as long as the company's is executing. And if you see Dave sell his shares and Matt sell his shares, or me or Nico, that's when you need to poop your pants.
Yeah.
Awesome,
Yeah.
Guys.
Not too much for me to add to that. I think, Matt was right on. Just like follow, I think, what the company is doing more than the stock price, and you'll be happier in the long run. So.
Yeah. And I, for my own, bought some shares and get educated, got entertained with this company, and maybe at the end of the day I get rewarded for this investment, and it's a good ride.
Awesome. Nico, can you get Peter back on for us for the next Christmas Rocket Lab Weekly?
Next year, okay.
We won't talk about the stock. We'll only talk about the company.
That sounds good.
Cool.
Okay, awesome. Merry Christmas to you all. Thank you so much for being here, and see you again, hopefully.
Merry Christmas all.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Yeah. Ciao, ciao. Dave, are you